Welcome to Everything You Wanted to Know About Adjustments. My name is Karen Curtis, and I will be one of your presenters today. My friend and coworker Aline Sigler is with me, and you're going to be hearing from her later in the presentation. Aline and I are members of the Provider Outreach and Education team here at WPS, and we're really glad that you were able to join us today to get this information. Now, our goal today is to increase your knowledge on when and how to perform adjustments. We hope to do this by talking about when to perform adjustments, common errors and how to resolve them. And lastly, we're going to go over a couple of options that you have for submitting adjustments to WPS. Now, before we get too far into today's webinar, I want to say that adjustments are an action that can only be performed within the Fiscal Intermediary Standard System known as FISS. FISS is the claims processing system for services that are billed on a UBO4 or an 837I. Now, if you are a provider who bills using the CMS 1500 or the 837P, the information being presented today is not going to apply to you. I wanted to get this out there because I would really hate for someone to listen to our presentation only to discover that this isn't an option that's available to them. Now, I'd like to start by providing some basic information about adjustments. For some, this may be information that you already know, but for others, this may be new. There are essentially two types of adjustments that can be performed within FISS. A credit, which will recoup a payment and cancel the previous claim, and an adjustment which will make changes to a previously processed claim. Now, internally, you may call these different terms. Personally, I have never used the term credit adjustment. Many of us just refer to those as cancels because that's what it did. It canceled the original claim. Debit adjustments were, I always just called them adjustments because it adjusted the original claim. So your facility may have different terms that you use, but this is how CMS defines the two types of adjustments. Credits or cancel-only adjustments should only be done if a claim was processed with an incorrect provider number or under the wrong Medicare number. These claims should then be resubmitted with the correct information. All other adjustments or changes should be processed as debits. Now, types of bills can provide us with a lot of information. The first digit tells us what type of facility is submitting the claim. We can quickly determine if the claim is from a hospital, a skilled nursing facility, or a clinic. The second digit can tell us things such as if the patient is in an inpatient stay or if they're receiving services as an outpatient. Now, the third digit is referred to as the frequency. And this can tell us if a claim is an admit through discharge, if the patient is still at the hospital, and in cases of adjustments, not only can it let us know if it's a credit or a debit, but it gives us some information as to who has requested the change or why the change is being made. Now here you will see a list of all the possible frequencies that can be used for an adjustment. I can say that after 28 years in Medicare, there are still a couple that I have honestly never seen. If the provider requests a debit adjustment, the type of bill is going to end with a 7. If the provider initiated a cancel, it's going to end with an 8. Now, I'm not going to cover all of these, but I do want to mention a few of the little more ones that are a little more common. XXGs are adjustments that are initiated by Common Working File. You may have heard the term unsolicited response. So Common Working File houses all of the claims from every Medicare contractor. So it makes sense that they would be able to detect conflicts in information that a single MAC may not know about. Now, when an error is detected, a common working file adjustment or an unsolicited response is initiated in order to make a correction. So examples could include overlapping claims, beneficiary eligibility changes, or incorrect information. Sometimes WPS processes a claim for a hospital and we don't see any overlap, but maybe a claim is submitted to NGS or Palmetto, and then when those claims get out to Common Working File, the dates of service overlap. So that's when we get these unsolicited responses. Now, XXIs are used for MAC initiated adjustments. Some of you may be familiar with the term mass adjustments. In my experience, this most commonly occurs when there's an update made in FISS. Sometimes the system updates, changes codings, and that can always cause problems and maybe claims to process incorrectly. When this happens, the error is reported, and after the error is corrected and a fix has been installed, CMS may instruct all of the contractors to perform mass adjustments. So they have to collect all of those claims that processed incorrectly, and then they have to adjust them so that they can run back through the system. Uh, you may see these issues listed on our system status page under the FISS claims processing alerts. So a lot of times this affects like hundreds of claims, but those are going to show as an XXI type of bill. Now, adjustments that are done to change Medicare to be the primary payer or make Medicare the secondary payer are going to show up as an XXM type of bill. Um, these are what's going to be considered Medicare secondary payer adjustments. There's other adjustments, a QIO, those if we get initiated, an adjustment initiated by a QIO, you're going to see an XXP, an OIG is going to be an XXK, and so on. Now, as with all claims, there are some timely filing rules for adjustments. If an item or a service is left off of the initial claim, then an adjustment to add that item or service must be filled within the timely filing period for the initial claim. So that's going to be 12 months or 1 calendar year after the date of service or items were provided. Now, an exception to this is going to be if you are making changes to a claim that would result in a higher weighted DRG. So maybe you have to make changes to a diagnosis or a procedure code, and that is going to result in you getting a higher payment than you did on the original claim. Now, we're talking about claims that get paid through DRG, so usually like inpatient hospital claims. Now, in these cases, adjustments must be submitted within 60 days of the date of the remittance advice for the original claim. Failure to meet that deadline is going to result in the adjustment being rejected. So when is it appropriate to request a claim adjustment? Adjustments to make Medicare the primary or secondary payer. MSP rejections are consistently some of our top denials. But the good news is that you can correct these claims through the adjustment process. If you didn't know that the patient had an insurance that was primary to Medicare, you can bill the primary and then adjust your claim to show that the primary payment was made. If a situation that comes up a lot when I'm doing timely filing webinars is that these primary insurance companies end up taking their money back and stating that Medicare is primary. Now, if you already have a claim in the system, then you can adjust that claim to make Medicare primary. So I always suggest, even if Medicare or even if a beneficiary has an insurance that's primary to Medicare, always get that claim into Medicare so that if something happens down the road, your claim's in the system and you can adjust it and make the changes that you need to make. Maybe some services didn't get added to the claim, Or maybe the claim contains some extra services that need to be removed. Both of these would be appropriate reasons for a claim adjustment. Changing units on a line. This could be due to a clerical error, or maybe the numbers got transposed or miskeyed. That would be something that you can just set up an adjustment and correct that. A change in patient status would be another reason to initiate adjustment. Maybe a patient was discharged to home, but it was later discovered that the patient was transferred to another facility. Or maybe it's been reported that the patient was transferred to a skilled nursing facility, but they ended up going to an inpatient rehabilitation facility. So adjustments may have to be done in order to make those corrections. Now, before we go into how to adjust a claim, I want to cover some common errors in the hopes that you can avoid these on your submissions. Now, there are certain situations when a claim should not be adjusted. First, if the claim is not finalized. Any claim that has been returned to provider is not finalized and should not be adjusted. These claims can be identified because they have a status of a T. These claims are being sent back for corrections, and they're going to have to process back through the FISS edits before they will be eligible for payment. Also, claims that have been suspended, those are going to contain an S in the status. There could be a variety of locations just depending on the edit that they have on them, but these claims are going to be in a location and they're waiting for internal staff to work on them before they can continue processing and work their way to finalization. Claims that are denied and have a status of a D. If you have a claim that is in status location DB9997, you're going to need to submit an appeal. Now, if there's a line item that has been denied with a reason code that is within the 50000 range, changes cannot be made to that line of service. So you would also need to submit an appeal for that denied service line if you wanted to make changes to it. If the claim has been rejected, meaning it is in status location RB9997, and it has an X in the tape to tape field, these claims should not be adjusted. Instead, a new claim would have to be submitted. And we'll go into this a little bit further in just a little bit. You should not try to adjust claims where adjustments have been initiated by another contractor. So these are kind of those types of bills that we looked at earlier. So those are adjustments that were initiated by a quality improvement organization, those internal adjustments that are set up by the MACs, the Office of Inspector General, or maybe a recovery auditor. Those claims, there is another entity that adjusted those claims for a reason, so those should not be set up. Lastly, are the claims that have an O, a Q, an X, or a Z in the tape-to-tape field. The reason that you do not want to adjust these claims is because they have not posted to Common Working File. So what's going to happen is when an adjustment is set up, the system's not going to recognize the claim and you're going to end up getting an error. Now, we're going to go into these in a little more detail, but some common errors that we see are mismatching information, trying to set up an adjustment off an original that has already been adjusted or has an adjustment that is pending, claims rejected as a duplicate or denied claim or charge, invalid cross-reference DCNs, and not having the correct information in the remarks field. So reason code 30905 is going to assign if FISS is unable to find the original claim. This is going to be based off of the cross-reference DCN that was used when creating the adjustment. So make sure to verify the patient's Medicare number. Check the original claim and make sure that you're using the correct DCN to make your changes. Verify the dates of service in the PTAN to make sure that those are correct. Now to resolve the error, you could submit a new adjustment, making sure that you are using all the correct information. And if the claim was submitted electronically and you're going to change those dates of service, you're going to want to make sure that the claim contains condition code D0, and then you can F9 that claim to get that to continue processing. Now, if an adjustment is created off of a claim that has already been adjusted, or if an adjustment was set up but hasn't finalized, then you're going to see reason code 30912. If you realize that this is a duplicate adjustment and that you already have one that's in the system and everything's going good with that, then you can just disregard and leave the duplicate alone. If you realize that an adjustment was set up off of an incorrect claim, then you're going to want to take that adjustment and you're going to want to correct the cross-reference DCN so that that adjustment can continue processing and make the changes to the correct original claim. Claims that have been rejected as duplicates cannot be adjusted. If an adjustment is set up off of one of these claims, it's going to receive reason code 30919. Now, in this situation, you're going to need to search for the original claim. Does the claim need corrections made? Was the original already adjusted? These are things that you're going to need to determine before you're going to be able to take your next steps. If you find that the original claim needs to be corrected and an adjustment has not already been created, then you're going to want to create an adjustment off that original claim and using the correct DCN. Now, earlier I mentioned that adjustments should not be made when the original claim was medically reviewed and either fully denied or has charges that were denied. This is going to result in reason code 30940. Now, there are limited circumstances that would allow for these claims to be adjusted. If you have a claim that was denied for an NCD, so the denial code is going to begin with a 5, then it's going to have another number, which is usually a 2, a 3, or a 4, and then it's going to have the letters NCD. Now, in order to adjust these claims, a diagnosis code change is required in order for that adjustment to process. If you feel that the diagnosis codes that were used on the original claim are medically appropriate, then you would need to appeal that original. If the claim denied with reason code 56900, stating that medical records were not received, you will need to submit a reopen. Changes cannot be made to units of a denied service. So if you disagree with the determination that was made by medical review, you're going to want to submit an appeal in those circumstances. Reason code 30955 will assign if the adjustment contains an invalid cross-reference DCN that does not match the original claim. So in order to correct this issue, you're going to want to compare the cross-reference DCN that's shown on the adjustment to the claim you are trying to adjust. Then you can make corrections to the invalid DCN and store the claim to allow it to move on through the process. Now, CMS also requires Medicare contractors to suspend all adjustment requests that contain condition code D0. Reason code 37541 will assign so that internal staff can review these situations. Now, if there is another claim change reason code that better fits why the adjustment is being done, you really want to use that. Not only will this allow the adjustment to bypass this reason code, but consistently using condition code D9 could be seen as abuse and it could be reported to the Office of Inspector General. Now, if there truly is not another code that describes the change that you are trying to make, then you will want to add remarks so that you can alert staff as to what changes are being made to the claim. Now, WPS has created a resource to help you with this. You are going to find a link at the bottom of this slide. The list that you see here was taken directly from the resource. So these remarks should be added to the second line of the remarks field, and no other information should be present. This will allow for more official processing of the adjustment. Failure to do this will result in the adjustment being returned to the provider. I will take you out real quick to look at this resource. You will have to be in jurisdiction J5A or J8A, but literally it has everything that you want out here. You just take what is in bold and you enter that into the remarks section. So you can literally copy and paste from this resource into your claim, and that will allow for that claim to process much faster. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, I am now going to turn things over to Aline, so I am going to stop sharing. Aline is going to start sharing. So you may see a few blips on your screen. Give me one moment here. Okay, Aline, take it away.
All right, thanks, Karen. Give me just a second here, everybody, as we trade off. Hopefully I'm in the right place here. All right. Well, I want to thank Karen. She did a really great job informing you all about the types of adjustments that there are, when you can and when you cannot adjust a previously processed claim, and also educating us about those common errors that we see. They might not be ones that you've come across yet, but having that information and knowing a little bit more about them will kind of give you a starting point on when you're working your adjustments, what you need to do there. And so now let's take a look at the process itself. Submitting an adjustment can be done electronically, directly into the Fiscal Intermediary Standard System via direct data entry. So we got a couple more acronyms for you here. DDE is what I'm talking about, or with a paper UBO4 claim form. Many of you have billing software through a vendor that you use to submit claims and adjustments. You know, it might be customized for your office or your facility. So for that reason, there's really no way for us to show you that. You're going to go to your vendor if you need education about that, because literally everyone on the webinar might have a different process and different screens. But they all link together behind the scenes to adjust your claims within the FISS system. So obviously, it's going to be faster and more efficient for all of us to work electronically, but there are times that a hard copy claim form is required. So we will cover that briefly in just a few minutes as well. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about direct data entry. A lot of you may already know this, but we could have varying degrees or levels of experience with people listening to this education. So some of you might not be as familiar. So we want to break it down just a little bit. So FISS is the processing system that was chosen or designated by CMS to be used for all Part A and Part B facility or institutional claims. Direct data entry then is a real-time FISS application. And so what it does is it gives you direct access for claims entry, correction of certain claim processing issues, and also inquiry purposes. So if you have any experience with DDE at all, you know that there are certain screens and files that you can go to look up certain information. That's what I mean by inquiry purposes. And it's also a valuable tool for providers who use batch submissions to transmit claims electronically, which the majority of our providers do. So you're downloading your claims in batches, we're getting them in batches, but then you have the choice of using direct data entry to actually work on your claims, look at your claims, watch your claims, that sort of thing. We do have a manual on our website that is a great resource for you, and it's really easy to get to. First of all, Karen mentioned this is just a Part A function, so make sure you're on the Part A section of our website. The easiest place to find it is on the right-hand side in our quick links area. Or if you scroll down to the blue footer under the heading of educational opportunities, you'll see a link to it there as well. There's a lot of different ways to get to it. Okay, so this slide shows you a high-level overview of the steps in making an adjustment. We'll go over this as kind of a cheat sheet or a quick reference, and then we'll look a little bit closer at each one of these steps. Hopefully that will help it make more sense when you see the screens. So it starts out with the main menu. And the main menu selection is 3 for claims correction. So that might be a little misleading if you're not familiar with DDE. We think of claims corrections as working on claims that are still pending, but that's the area within DDE that you're going to go to. And then we have a set of sub-menu selections to choose from based on your facility type and the type of claims. So as you see here, we have 30 for inpatient claims, 31 for outpatient, and 32 for skilled nursing facility. This is going to give you a list of the claims to choose from, and then from there, you can sort to narrow your results. But this is my thinking. If you're doing an adjustment, you know which claim you're looking for. So you can just enter the patient's MBI and the dates of service and bring that claim right to the top of the list. Then what you'll do is you'll place an S in front of the claim to select it. You'll go in and make the necessary changes and then give details as to what the adjustment is for. Again, we're going to go over this more in detail. We do that with a couple things, the claim change reason code and an adjustment reason code. And once you've done all those things, you submit the adjustment or store it by pressing F9, and then you're done. So it sounds really easy when you see it all on one slide. And it's not hard, it's just a process. I do have a link at the bottom of this slide to the DDE manual. So if you're just getting started, you want to learn more about it and see these actual screenshots in person, we gave you that opportunity. If you've downloaded a copy of the slide deck, you have all of these live links. So the main menu, this is where it all starts. This is our jumping off point, if you will, to everywhere else within DDE. So you can see the different menu options listed here. We have inquiries, claims/attachments, claims correction, and online reports. To select the claims correction menu, you're going to enter a 3 or a 03 in this lower section down here. You don't actually need the 0. I just put the example exactly as it's shown here, just to hopefully alleviate any confusion. Then you're going to press enter. So then you're going to get to this screen that has the submenus. And so I've just put a rectangle around the adjustments section because we're focusing on adjustments. A cancel is also a type of adjustment. You know, that's where you're going to completely void a processed claim. Then you would use these selections over here to the right. That's just for your information. So then what you'll do is you'll select which one you're going to do, inpatient, outpatient, or skilled nursing facility. At this time, WPS doesn't process home health or hospice claims. That's why I didn't mention those. So then you'll take that number and then you'll put it down here in the menu selection and press enter. Then you'll get a whole list of claims. And I know with our limited screenshots that we have to show you, there's only one claim here. However, you're probably going to have a whole page, multiple pages, depending on how many Medicare claims you have in the system at any given time. A couple things to note on this here. The status location, which is right here, that's automatically going to default to P for processed. So if you need to make changes to a rejected claim, what you can do is use your tab key, go over to that field where the P is, type in R and press enter. So then it'll resort those claims and bring those to the forefront for you. And then again, use your Medicare ID, which is the patient's MBI, their Medicare number, and dates of service. You can use those, and then it'll bring you that patient's claims that you're looking for that you need to do an adjustment on. Now, if the claim that you need to adjust is in status location P09998, that letter O indicates the claim is offline. And that could be due to its age or the number of claims that are in the patient's history. So that means it's been archived, it's offline. So in this instance, what you need to do is place an S in front of it and press enter. And then when you do that, you'll see that all the fields within that claim are completely blank. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, if you've ever seen something like that, and maybe you thought it was, you know, a problem with your system or something like that. Take a look at that status location. If the second letter is an O, that claim's offline. So what you need to do is you need to bring it back to an active status. So what you can do then, because that status location is going to be your clue, if you put an S in front of it and press F10, then you'll see a system generated message at the bottom of your screen states it will be available in 7 days. Now, one thing about that 7 days, it's not actually always 7 days. The system needs to run a weekend cycle to bring that claim back from the archive. So if you, we call it retrieving. If you retrieve that claim on a Friday, it will be there the next Monday. So that's way less than 7 days. But again, it needs to run that weekend cycle. And that's probably more information than you really wanted to know. But these are just some situations that we thought it would be helpful for you to know. Now, if you do it on a Monday, it's not going to be available till the next Monday. And so that's why they tell you 7 days. Once it's retrieved, then you can proceed with your adjustment. So after you've selected your claim, you're going to notice that the type of bill will automatically default to end in a 7. You always need to choose the appropriate claim change reason code to reflect why the claim's being adjusted. In this example, there's a D1, and that reflects a change in charges. That's probably the most common one that we see. That's placed in the condition codes field. So you might have called it a D code. You might have called it a condition code, and not necessarily a claim change reason code. That's the official term. So this is a list of all the valid codes that there are. They're also listed in your DDE manual. I looked last night and I think they're pages 149 and 150 in the current version, which is dated June of 2025. One thing about this list, you notice that the D5 and the D6 are specific to canceled claims. But these are very important. This is part of CMS's requirements for reporting. And that's why Karen stressed the fact that if you're using a D9 automatically on all your adjustments, that's going to put up a red flag, because even though it may not affect your payment from Medicare, it's still improper reporting, and we just don't want to fall into that, that issue. So the next step then is to add an adjustment reason code. You're also going to need one of these, and it's placed on page 3 of the claim, the screenshot that I have here. You can see that it's claim page 3, and it goes right down here, adjustment reason code. This is kind of a secondary code. And if you're not sure what that is, the adjustment reason code is a 2-digit code, and it identifies the reason for performing an adjustment. The adjustment reason code supplements the claim change reason code. So it gives the system more detailed information, and these are required on adjustments, but not canceled claims. So for example, if we look at the D1 that was on the first page of the claim, this D1 change in charges, there are separate adjustment reason codes to tell the system whether it's an increase in the covered charges or a decrease in the covered charges. Hopefully that helps, it makes sense for you. In past education, I have had providers tell me that they never put this on their adjustments. They didn't know what it was, they never heard of it, they don't do it. It might be, and I'm going to caution you here, that your billing software is programmed to automatically put in a generic code. There's an OT, that means other. That still is not proper reporting for CMS. So I just want to caution you about that, and that wouldn't be the most appropriate thing to do. Okay. Next I want to talk about is the adjustment reason code file. What do you do if you don't know what to put in that field? Well, part of the inquiry within DDE has a particular screen or file that you can go to. And this is an example of that. This is the screenshot. So when you go to the adjustment reason code screen, which is submenu or shortcut 16, if you noticed on our prior slide, up here in the top left corner, SC, it actually stands for screen control, but I call it shortcut. You can actually jump right to that file from this page in your adjustment to find the code that you want, or to verify that you're using the right one. So if you use shortcut 16 and press enter, you'll be taken right to this screen. Initially it's going to be blank, so hit enter again and it'll populate and you can look through the list. You can use your F6 key and just scroll through to find the one that you need. Or if you want to verify, like I think it's ZZ, but is it ZA? I can't remember. You can use this field where the reason code is, type in the one that you want to see, it'll bring it to the top of the list, and you can read the description. So again, giving you all these things to hopefully help not only make it more efficient for you, but to make sure that it's correct and accurate for CMS. So the next thing that we need are remarks for explanation. Remarks are on claim page 4. And they're not required in every instance. They're not required on standard adjustments. But we do recommend that you put something on page 4. So if you or a coworker maybe don't remember why the claim was adjusted, those remarks would be helpful. I don't know if you've ever had to look at claims that were processed by a previous biller or something like that. Sometimes it's not clear what that is. So remarks are recommended. Now they are required if you're using a D9 claim change reason code. Karen told you about that earlier, gave you a link to the article on our website. It gives you specific instructions about what's required in each instance. That again is going to help your adjustment process more quickly. Before we move on, I do want to remind you that not all processed claims can be adjusted. Some examples are, and we mentioned this, if a claim or a line on that claim was medically reviewed, you'll have to submit an appeal. If the claim was rejected and it did not post to the patient's master record on common working file, there would be no need to do an adjustment. You could just send a new claim. So what I want to do now is explain to you how you know. How do you know if the claim did or did not post to the patient's master record? So the tape to tape field is going to tell you that. This slide was added after the presentation was published, but I did feel like it was important for you to be able to see an example of what I'm talking about. And it's 100% my fault for not getting it in the original presentation. So if you're looking at your slide deck and you're like, wait a second, I don't see this, that's why. So the tape to tape field can be seen on the line item detail page of claim page 2. If you're not familiar with DDE, page 2 is where all of our charges are listed. And then from there, you can press F2 or F11 twice, and you'll get to this page. Right here is the tape to tape field. It's abbreviated TPE to TPE to TPE. So apparently we didn't have room for those two A's, but that's the field I'm talking about. That's the field you can go to on a processed claim, one that's completely finalized, to see whether or not the claim posted to common working file. If there's an X in that field or any of those other characters that Karen mentioned, I believe it was on page or slide 10. Don't quote me on that. If there's an X there, it means the claim did not post a common working file, and you can send a new bill. So you can take a look at slide 10, some of those other examples of the tape to tape indicators that cannot be adjusted. So wanted to show you that because that's going to help you a lot. If you can just drop a new claim, it's going to take less time. So in some situations, we're transitioning now obviously to talk about the paper claims. Sometimes you need to or you have to send a hard copy adjustment. Sometimes we tell you that you have to send one. And so there are cases when that's going to come into play too. So in addition to the usual claim information, here you see what fields are required on the UB04 for adjustments and cancel claims. So starting at the top of the claim form and working our way down, the type of bill. It will end in a 7, because these are adjustments that you're initiating, you as the provider, or 8 if you're completely voiding it and it's a cancel. Next, we need that claim change reason code in the condition code field. So that's going to be this area right here. You're going to choose the one that best suits your situation, or a D9 if none of those other ones do. The document control number, or the DCN, that's form locator or field 64, and that's right here. I know with the screenshot, it's impossible to have everything show up clearly. It's a little blurry, and so that's why we've provided indicators here to direct your eyes right to what we're talking about. So the DCN is the DCN of the claim that's being adjusted. Keep in mind what Karen told us earlier about setting it up off the most recent action. If a claim's been adjusted more than once, make sure that you're choosing the DCN for the most recent action. And then finally, use the remarks field if necessary. Then you'll complete the rest of the UB04 according to how the claim should be processed when it's finalized. We have a link at the bottom of this slide here. That's to an article on our website about the UB04 claim form and the requirements to note. So you can check that out if you want to find out more about that. So at this time, I want to go over the questions that were submitted during the registration process, and then I'll check back in with Karen to see if we've gotten any in the chat. First question is, how to adjust a 11G type of bill in status RB9997. Okay, so in a 11G, and it's in a rejected status because it starts with an R. And they say it was recouped for incorrect discharge status. The reject is posted to common working file, but when I use that DCN, the adjustment gets returned to provider, RTP'd, saying no record of processed claim. So one thing I want to make you aware of, Karen and I aren't able to get into FISS or DDE. It's not part of our scope of work within our role. So I'm kind of guessing here. First thing I noticed is the type of bill ends in a G. So that indicates it's a common working file adjustment. Karen told you about those unsolicited responses and things like that. And it falls into a couple different situations when we talk about that slide where she said claims that are in an R status, and then the very next bullet had those different bill types. If it was rejected with a G, but it was posted to common working file, in my mind and my understanding of FISS, you should be able to adjust that to correct the discharge status code. But a couple other things that I thought about were, since it was a common working file adjustment, I'm wondering if there were other lines maybe on the claim that were denied, and that's what it is. I also thought if you're doing an adjustment to change the discharge status code and it's going to result in a higher weighted DRG or more payment to your facility, maybe that's why the system doesn't like it. The other thing is maybe it's on common working file, but look to see if it has a cancel date. That might be why you got the message saying that it can't find the previous claim or the processed claim. So those are just some thoughts that I had. My advice really is to call customer service. Ask them to look at it with you and see if they can't provide some advice as to why you can't adjust it to change the patient discharge status code. They may advise you to send a new claim, or they may have it investigated further. So I hope that helps. Next question we received, when do I correct a claim versus sending a new claim? Well, we talked about this a little while ago. And if the claim is processed but did not post to the common working file, send a new claim. Check that tape to tape field. And those were the only pre-submitted questions that we received. So now I'll open it up. I want to check in with Karen and see if we've had any additional questions. Karen?
Hi, Eileen. Thank you for all of that great instruction. We did get a question about the X and the tape to tape. And so if you could just kind of clarify that X and the tape to tape, when they should adjust and when they should submit a new claim.
Sure. If there's an X or any of those other um, indicators, let me think here. I'm going to go back if I can within the presentation to see if I can find that. All right, here we go. So if there is an O, a Q, an X, or a Z in the tape to tape, it did not post to Common Working File, and you should be able to send a new claim. And again, you're going to check that out very easily on our on that detail page of claim 2. Sorry, I lost my words there for a second. To check to see if that has those haters. Right here. Sorry for moving around there, but instead of me trying to explain it, let's just go back here. So from claim page 2, which is your page where you have all your charges, hit F2 or F11 twice to get to this screen, and then you'll be able to see that tape to tape field. If it's blank, like this indication here, this example we have, there's nothing there. So yes, this claim did post to the patient's master record. You would have to do an adjustment, or if it was denied, you'd have to do an appeal. I hope that helps. Any other questions?
Eileen, we did get a question about are there exceptions to the rule in the tape to tape field? I am not aware of any exceptions as far as if the claim did not post a common working file. I'm not aware of any exceptions because the adjustment would receive an error. But I'll run that by you also to see if you're aware of any exceptions when it comes to that tape to tape field.
That I am aware of. Because what's going to happen is the system's going to get confused. And, that's the same reason that we tell you, don't adjust a claim that's not fully processed yet. So there's no exceptions there. One instance I can think of is for claims that are on the payment floor. Okay, so they're finalized. You can't touch them. You can't change them, but they're in that holding pattern where the payment hasn't been released to the provider. It's not hit your remittance advice yet. If you canceled or adjusted that claim, you run the risk of that money being taken back twice and then it getting kind of stuck. So we don't want that to happen, but there's no exceptions to that I am aware of.
Okay, we got some additional information. It looks like they were told if they need to make changes to the MBI number, but they're wondering if they would just need to submit a new claim. And I guess it would, I mean, I don't know if the original rejected for an incorrect MBI. Um,
Yeah, it's going to depend on how that original one processed. So if a patient, maybe they had their Medicare card stolen or compromised somehow, CMS does issue, or excuse me, Social Security does issue a brand new number, not just a new card, but a brand new number. That's a safeguard. So if the original claim paid under the previous number, you're probably going to have to cancel that one and resubmit it under the new one. If there's more to it than that, I would contact customer service so that they can look at all the claims for that beneficiary with you and advise.
okay, thank you for that, Aline. Hopefully, yep, that That answered their question. We do not have any further questions in the chat.
Great. Okay, we're going to move on here. Thanks for those great questions. You know, if one person has a question, usually that means that somebody else has had a similar question, and it's really helpful to get that information out there. So please take a few minutes to complete a survey about this course. You know, let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, and then what we can do differently going forward. And you do have just a few options here, depending on what your preference is. Karen added a link to the chat so you can copy and use that link. Or when you exit the webinar, you're going to get a pop-up that will ask you to go to an external site. That external site is the CMS page for the survey. And that message is going to look something like this up here with a triangle, and it'll have a continue button. And it's not real clear, if you've never seen that before, what exactly that is. But it wants to take you to that survey, so it is safe there. If you're listening to this course as an encore, you're going to get a different notification. You're going to get a box that's going to look like this bottom one with the finger and the stars and the pointing. That's going to be a link to take you to that survey, or you can scroll down in the description of the video and find a link. However you do that, please give us your feedback. Let us know how we're doing. Give us ideas for education you're interested in. In a few minutes, you're going to receive an email. It's going to thank you for attending. It also has your contact hours, a certificate of achievement, has your name. If you need to turn that in for credit towards continuing education units, you can do that. If you don't see it, check your junk or your spam folder and make sure you have the WebEx email address listed in your safe senders. On behalf of Karen and myself, everyone else in Provider Outreach and Education, thank you so much for participating today. We hope to have you join us for future education, and we look forward to that survey feedback. Thank you so much. You may now disconnect.